So the session here is called Hack the Resume. Let's see how long it takes depending on how much you guys want to talk. But I have a couple of things I want to go through. A couple of people submitted their resume so that we can also review them together. And at the end, then I'll just provide a couple other tips for like, interviewing as well as kind of follow up and how to search for a job. Okay, so firstly, my name is Helenja. I am a senior talent acquisition manager, and I work at Wave. I'm sure you guys heard a lot about Wave today, but for those who maybe missed some of the other sessions, we're in the fintech space. Essentially, we create financial software for small businesses. And senior talent acquisition manager, essentially that means I hire people, I recruit, I build teams, and I in particular do that for the engineering team here at Wave. Okay, so agenda. We are going to start with kind of just resume, some tips and tricks. Going to walk you through some of my, my opinions on what I would advise you would do. Then we'll workshop through some of the resumes. Then we'll go through some tips around finding a job and kind of how to apply for them, and as well as interviewing. And then I'll leave the end for Q&A. I see there's something in chat, so make sure. Oh, hi, Matthew. Perfect. Okay. So a lot of people have the opinion a resume needs to be one page. I personally don't care, and a lot of people don't. If it's 1 to 2 pages, great. If it's more, if you have a lot to say, put it there. It kind of shows who you are. I mean, don't go above like 4 or so, but like that's just generally, it's not as strict. The rules aren't as strict as people make them out to be. I would rather have you be yourself. And if you're a wordy person, put more words. If you are very blunt, that also shows up on a 1-page resume. That's totally fine. What I would advise is use a template. It's fine if you do it on your own via Word or some other program, but ultimately there's so many good templates online. You can save yourself a lot of time, and a lot of them are built well that when it's uploaded to like a program where recruiters review the resumes, it's very easy for them to go through, and it standardizes kind of the structure of it. Just some advice, and I really, honestly, there's so many good ones online. Feel free to use those. This next point seems really silly to mention, but you'd be surprised by how bad grammar is on resumes. It's okay. Mine's terrible too. Like, I feel like the last person to talk. I feel like a hypocrite saying this because I'm sure there's spelling mistakes in this presentation, but just like use a program. There's things like Grammarly, have a friend read it over, look it over the next day. Like if I see a spelling mistake in a resume, I don't personally care, but I'm sure there's lots of companies and there's lots of recruiters out there who may have been like an English major and they get really offended by you not using like Oxford period or Oxford like comma or something. So just be mindful of that. Have someone look it over for you. It's a simple step you can take, just help kind of move the dial of you being more successful while you apply. This one also seems like it should just be logical, but just convert it to a PDF. Resumes are being reviewed by sometimes humans and sometimes by programs. So they can reformat it where it looks awful or information is actually cut out. So by using a PDF, it kind of standardizes and it keeps it as you want it to be presented. So next I'm kind of going to like the bigger chunky one. So this is something that historically people have been afraid to have on their resume is a gap. So, a gap between school and your first job, or a gap between jobs, or taking some time off during school as well. There's a lot of good reasons that people may do that, and it's perfectly fine if you do for whatever reason. It could be, personal, family, you want to travel, you just needed a break, or you want to try something else out. That is completely fine. All I would advise is to explain what it is, and if it's something that's really, deeply personal, you don't actually want to talk about, just say due to a personal matter. And if someone probes, you want to just say like, I'm sorry, I'm not really comfortable discussing that. But therefore kind of just explain something. And if it's something like a trip or you took time off to try something new in your life, that's perfectly fine. It's a talking point that makes it more interesting. But don't just kind of leave that big gap there if you take some time off. Otherwise, when writing your resume, explain the impact of your work. This is often something that a lot of people miss, and you don't need to do it for every single thing. But essentially what I mean is like add context. So when interviewing, actually, there's a method called the STAR method. You'll kind of see a description here in this slide. But essentially what it means is provide the situation, the task you did, action, and then the result. And you can use that when you're writing a resume as well. So for example, I like one of your bullet points would be like, I created a login page. Well, great. It's not really interesting for someone to put that, but if you said, we needed to monetize it, I did research, I presented my information, I built a new login page, it increased, customer satisfaction, it increased the bottom line, it decreased drop off or whatever it may be. There's more there to work with, and it shows, what you actually did, like the task you did versus just kind of like, I did X. So that's something that I really recommend on a resume. And kind of as we workshop through some of them, you'll see some examples of that and some examples where it could have been done where to provide more context. Okay, let's see. Kind of just going on to this of some tips before we dive into the workshop portion. A lot of you are students, right? I think the majority of you are. You may not have that much experience. You may have nothing to put on your resume yet. You may have a couple personal projects or a school project, but otherwise, think through what else you do in your life that is related experience or related hobbies, other jobs, other things you volunteered for, or just other interests, and provide more to kind of fill it up and provide more information on who you actually are. Like, I'm sure there's a lot more that you can put there than you realize. And kind of the next bullet point goes through that. So what are you currently learning? Or even if you're in the middle of something and you're not taking on any other tasks, you're learning anything new, what do you want to learn next? If I'm looking at a resume and I see, this person lists they want to learn, React Native is kind of the next course or next like Udemy course they're planning on taking. That's something that I'm going to pick up on. And as I'm looking through the resume, I'm like, oh, we actually have a team who needs that skill set. They'd be interested in training somebody. Also to that, we're going to go into, I'll kind of skip one point here and say include buzzwords and a full tech stack, is that, remember earlier when I mentioned sometimes there's a human reviewing it, sometimes there's a program, essentially a machine. They're just filtering for maybe like 4 key phrases, 4 buzzwords, or 4 things they want you to have listed. And even though you may be interested in it or you may have experience, it may have not been important for you to add in the resume. So just be careful that you may be missing something a job is looking for just because you don't have experience with it yet, but you can still add it in saying you're interested in that. So just something to pad your resume if you don't have enough to put there. So going back up to the previous bullet point, kind of along that same line, looking to pad if you don't have too much going, like too much experience just yet. Often it's used to be called like the objective, and it's used to just be written, I would like to be employed as a software engineer. That's not really what we're looking for. We're looking for like, what will you actually find fulfilling? So great, you want to potentially be a dev, but like, what types of problems are you interested in? What types of languages, like what would you like to get out of your career? If you need to add more, those are good statements and good things to put that will help kind of provide context for who you are. And then this last couple 2 points, so it's more just around actually applying quickly. So one like kind of trick that I know a lot of people use that is very, very helpful. If you're interested in a particular job and this is like your dream job at your dream company, and this is where you're going to spend like a big chunk of time trying to get yourself, an interview or get your foot in the door, look at the JD and look at other people on LinkedIn who have that exact same job and look at the bullet points you're seeing again and again. So if on their LinkedIn resume, see on someone's LinkedIn, it says like they're using GraphQL or they're using React Native or they're using something, make sure to include those things then in your resume so that if a system is looking at it, you'll get through to the next step. If a human's looking at it, hopefully they notice that and then push you through anyways. But what you can really do is cater your actual resume and almost duplicate the job description within it to make sure you hit every single bullet point you're looking for. Now, you may not have experience with some of the things they want. This goes back to, I'm interested in learning this, or this is what I'm planning on learning next. Or if it's something that you have like a T skill to, so like a comparative chart, so like I have this skill, or they're looking for this, but I have this, which is like a very good comparable, like Angular and React, for example. Like that's a valuable thing to note so that they know you have experience with front-end frameworks. So I'm not saying do that for every job, that would be a lot of work, but if there's 1 or 2 that you really, really care about, this is just a way to help you, just keep moving the kind of the needle to be successful in terms of getting an interview. And then for those who don't know what they want to do, don't know where they want to work, create a couple of versions of your resume catered towards different things. So, maybe backend development, front end, maybe you're interested in DevOps, maybe data engineering, you're not really sure, but don't just use the same one for all those jobs because they will be looking for different things and you'll have a higher success rate. Takes an hour or two to create a couple of versions, but probably worth it in terms of success of getting an interview. So before we kind of go into the workshop portion of going through some of the resumes, any questions around this or anything anybody wants to mention? Taking that as a no. Feel free to interrupt if you change your mind. Okay. Give me 1 second and I'll pull up the next thing. Okay, so I have a couple resumes that some people submitted, and just to quickly go through some of them, we can talk about some of the points I just mentioned in relation to some of these resumes. I want to say that there's no wrong way to do this, and it's like I truly think that like you should do what you think is best. This is just my advice, and we can kind of go through some of these, and that there's no, if someone's resume is light or anything, don't judge. Like we're just looking at examples here. So for this resume here, you can kind of see that this is a template we'll see quite a bit. Again, yeah.
I don't think we can see the resume that you're mentioning.
No.
No, just the resume workshopping slide. Are you only sharing one screen versus your whole desktop, maybe?
I'm sharing my whole desktop, but let me take a quick look.
And just to answer one question in the chat, Zach, yeah. Where can I submit mine? But the submissions were due actually on Monday, but we also had some later ones, but I'm not sure if we can have one right now.
Okay, if we have time at the end and we want to stay on, we can do that. I'm not against it by any means.
And there was another question earlier that asked, are there any particular resume templates that you suggest we use?
Honestly, so as we're going through this, you'll see a couple different versions that we can go through, and you'll kind of see what they look like. And then I can provide links after the fact. I don't have them on me right now. Can you see my screen now with the resume?
Yep, we can see it now.
Perfect. Okay. So this is actually one of the standard templates I was talking about. So this is something we see quite a lot. I think a lot of schools do provide this one, as well as like if you just literally Google it, this is the first one that comes up. But it's a great template because it is very structured. And also for myself, who may have looked at like 100 resumes, I'm very familiar with the format. If I need to find information quickly, it's really easy for me to scan. But that being said, I do encourage, do whatever you want. If you want color, if you want a different format, go for it. It's just a piece of paper. But ultimately, this is, they're including all the right information. So right now for this group, school is very important, including that you're in a co-program is important. If you do have any majors or minors, please include those as well. The expected graduation date, important as well, because that helps us also plan to know what year you're in and potential for like hire for after the fact. But otherwise, yeah, this is like a perfect example of someone who kind of listed things that really build them up. So they have some work experience, as you can see here, not necessarily related to the schooling they're in. We'll get to why that was very important for them to include, but otherwise they really padded their resume with great project information, providing links. It's really easy to read. And as you can see, like some of their some of the way they describe things provide a lot of context to what they've worked on. So it's not just like quick bullet points like used XYZ to do this. It provides like how it impacted or why they did it. So in terms of the information itself and how it's organized, fantastic. Links are fantastic. You can see they put their main languages and whatnot here, but here listed each one. That's really helpful for a company to understand like what do you actually have the most experience with if they're looking for something in particular. What I really love about this resume is the work experience, including like the work at Canadian Tire that's not related to their schooling or to the co-op they're probably particularly looking for. What this shows someone who's hiring is that you know how to work in workplace, you know how to work with others. They've been employed there for a long time. So that just shows someone who's committed to me personally. So if you do have work experience that doesn't relate to the field you're looking to go into, at this point in your career and looking for jobs, add those things in. It shows value and it's a value add. And lastly, like perfect in terms of adding extracurriculars, anything like that. Now, remember earlier when I had mentioned that, say if you don't have these things, say if you're kind of a little bit more junior or you haven't had the time or the space to be able to do all these types of projects or have work experience, maybe you did something else, while growing up. Everyone's situation is different. This is where you can pad it with, so if you don't have these types of things, pad it with those interests or things you'd like to learn and anything really kind of in that context. But yeah, generally like this is something pretty standard we'll see, but very much on like the great end of what it could look like. Very organized, well-written, lots of context. This is like another example. You can see someone used like a pretty similar format. School, technologies. They, for example, you can see they have more work experience related to the industry. So they put that first, that's important. What this person did, what I find interesting and helpful is that they actually just highlighted, you can see they highlighted and bolded some words here, sorry. And really, that's a great idea also at this point, because, realistically for some roles, we're getting hundreds of applications. If I only have an hour to look things through, this is a really quick way to quickly identify the ones that I want to spend a little bit more time on. Also, if you think back to when I said, look at the job descriptions, the JDs, if there's things that a company's particular, if they're listing like 4 things they want, might as well highlight those things on your resume so the reviewer sees it. But same format in terms of like work experience, projects, extracurriculars, awards. Again, fantastic resume. I think one thing that could be added in a little bit in a resume like this is maybe sometimes for some of these examples, add that kind of the impact piece. So, they may have implementing like the sentence right here. So implementing RESTful APIs using Flask and MySQL for storing, retrieving, farming contract data, sorry. And really, that's great, but why, or what was the impact? Why were you tasked with this and who did it help essentially? And, I'm not saying like you need to do that for every example, but I'm just saying it really adds helpful context for it to make you interesting and stand out a little bit more. But all in all, again, like a great resume to look at. Okay. This one here looks a little different, but same thing. Essentially that same format we talked about earlier. So one thing that I think is fantastic that this particular person did, but probably should have replicated again. So they went through and listed their projects first, because those are probably more notable work for them. I think it's really valuable if it's a personal project to actually add a quick descriptor line. So under Ticket Scout, you see here they added kind of what it does, and that helps for when we're having the conversation during an interview. We have context of what you're building for who and what and why. And I would just recommend, if this person is here today, to add that same kind of structure for your next one. I know it's the first bullet point, but maybe just restructure it so it looks similar. But that's a helpful tip for anyone who's kind of writing. If it's a company that the title, like the you know, the organization isn't well known, or if it's a project you work on where the title is kind of vague, it just kind of helps give context as to what the bullet points below are going to be about. But otherwise, great. Also good to add certificates if you have any, but same context in terms of like that same structured resume that we've seen a couple of times. That really helps. Otherwise, yeah, let's quickly see. This is again, a very similar one. So here, fine resume. What I'd recommend in this circumstance is that there could be more of that impact. So in the sentences here, they are quite short. So what did that mean? And then we have one project listed. So I know not everyone's been in school for a long time, but this person, for example, has been in school for about a year and 4 months now. So I know maybe it feels like some of the if you're writing a key project or personal projects have to be things that you worked on outside of school, but I'd recommend if you don't have that much work experience, you don't have that many projects, put down your school projects or put down projects that you're planning on building, put down those interests. Because I think this resume would come off more valuable if you put more on it in terms of what you've done. The school projects are incredibly valuable. And I think sometimes it's even okay if it wasn't a great project, you can write what you learned from it. So just a little bit more there to help kind of provide context and just fleshing out some of the bullet points they made in terms of like the kind of that star of like, at the end of the day, what did it mean? Okay, we have about 3 or 4 more. So bear with me as we go through this. Yep, so this is again pretty, they definitely, I think this person may not have used one of the online templates, but still kind of that same format that we're looking for. One thing that I would recommend people be mindful of is the images that you put in resumes, like this little LinkedIn image right here. It's often not clickable. So if you do want to share your LinkedIn, make sure either there's a link elsewhere posted on your application or somewhere else that they can find it, because sometimes the software that companies are using to review resumes are very archaic and they don't allow for clickable links in resume. So be mindful of that. But if you're also including personal projects that may have a link or anything else that may have a link, you may not actually have access to it, or they just may not know how to access it. But anyways, just a heads up on that. Otherwise, one thing I wanted to point out from this resume that I think is a good value add is, so this person put extracurriculars. Some of them are like development engineering related, but also some aren't. Like the club involvement, for example, the geography student society. It really adds color, it really adds an impression, and it adds a talking point also for the recruiter about who you are as a person. Like this extracurricular kind of like experiences here really shows what they care about in its talking points. And even as on my end, if say we're interviewing and maybe you're coming off a little bit nervous, or maybe think, okay, let's take a break from the like interviewing conversation, let's talk about something that's a bit more laid back. Those are good points for me actually to kind of just talk to you about and kind of just pivot a little bit to make it a little bit more easy, and then we can go back in. But I would say if you have space for it, or if there's somewhere to add it that makes sense, kind of build a full picture of yourself. Okay, so this is one of the other templates we see quite a bit. Honestly, this resume is very good, really well outlined. Again, the other thing I kind of wanted to mention here is that you see like they have their interests here because they had some room, and a good value add. There's a lot to speak to. And remember, sometimes often the first person you're interviewing with doesn't come from a technical space. They may have other things they care about. So that's a really good way for a connection as well. And then otherwise, they did a good job of actually listing a lot of tools and languages and frameworks, which again, even if some of them they don't have like professional experience, or like they're still very much like a junior in that area, it's good to add if someone's looking for those particular skills to see that you have exposure to it. So I think they did a really good job of listing quite a bit while not making it bulky. Otherwise, the only thing this happens actually quite a bit with resumes, and this is a good example. Just remember to keep it consistent. So this resume looks fantastic, but the one thing is that they added periods to this bullet point area and none of the others. And this happens so often, like I do it all the time too, but just make sure, like I honestly, as I mentioned before, like I literally wouldn't care, but there are people who may be reviewing who do. So just a heads up to make sure to keep like the kind of grammar consistent throughout them. Okay, so this is honestly, I really love this resume for the reason that it speaks to my soul of just being blunt and kind of giving the information that you're looking for. But I would recommend that they add a little bit more. So if this is it for you and this is the experience you have and you haven't worked on projects yet, or this is all the kind of the relevant work experience you have, put in a section about where you want to take your career, what things you want to learn next, and kind of your ambitions around that. And I'm sure there's probably some more technologies this person has exposure to, so add those in. I think for a resume like this, there's literally nothing wrong with it. It just could use a little bit more to make it more competitive against other ones and to show a little bit more who you are. So yeah, adding in the like your interests, if you're in any other clubs, as well as what you've learned, or you know, what you're planning on learning next, career goals, anything like that, would really pad this and make it like, you know, a more full resume. Okay, this is very similar to the last ones. I think I can't really add anything new in terms of like what we'd be looking for. The last thing that this kind of showcases that also just be mindful of. This is fine for most programs, but again, some companies, depending what types of companies you're applying for, like just for an example, like if you're applying to like an RBC, they use some really old programs that may actually cut the borders off, so the recruiter cannot see it in any way. They can't download the resume, just how it's built and laid out. They would not be able to see some of the edges of the resume, so some information will be cut off. So this is one of those circumstances where I recommend, like, if you have a lengthier resume that you can't actually fit on one page, just use two. Like, it really doesn't matter. Rather get the information out there than have it be perfectly one page. Because yeah, it may get cut off and people may not know some of the dates. Otherwise, fantastic resume. Included a good work. And then this was one of those ones that does provide good context in terms of kind of the value add. So in their DevOps engineer role, the kind of last bullet point around Terraform modules, you can see kind of the last sentence there, they add the impact. So the cutting of costs, creating new proofs of concepts by over 60%. So for a company that may be looking for someone who can help with bottom line or like understands that type of context or circumstance, this would be a resume that would be interesting and of value to review. Okay, I think this is the last one. Yep. Honestly, this is a fantastic example, actually, also in terms of if you're looking for something more to add, if you feel like you don't have enough for your resume, the relevant coursework, algorithms, like some of the searching algorithms may pick up those phrases which schools might be looking for, but also kind of this highlights really like what classes you found interesting in school and kind of the direction you're most likely going in. So if you're looking for more to add, A, it's valuable, and B, it takes up space if you don't have anything to put. So that's another good thing you can add in depending on how you want to structure your resume. And then otherwise, I would just recommend, like, for some of the experience and whatnot, just pad it a little bit more with the impact piece. But otherwise, also really good. You can see they also, this is one of the folks that added, you know, experience that isn't necessarily like engineering related, but shows something else. And this is a great example, like the leadership extracurricular being a RA at school. Like, there's a lot of responsibility that probably shows someone for me who's good at working with others, good at dealing with people. And that's really helpful for a team context when we're looking to, you know, build a team that's going to be highly collaborative. So yeah, those other things when you're doing your life, they can go in your resume. They're going to add value. Okay, that was the last resume. We can go back to the other piece. Actually, give me 1 second. Okay, before I dive back in, any questions or anything around the resumes that anyone wants to ask? Okay, taking that as a no, which is perfectly fine. Okay, the next couple of things are more on helping you, how to look for a job and some tricks as to get your resume to the right person. So first and foremost, at this point in your career, I highly recommend you apply to a lot of jobs. And it could be tedious, but I really think it's important that you really put yourself out there. And also, this is going to be an opportunity for you to A, practice interviewing, and B, start figuring out what you are not interested in. It's completely fine to go through an interview process and realize that a role isn't right for you, or a company isn't right for you, or even just a team, because it's going to help you narrow down what's actually going to make you happy and what will actually be fulfilling at the end of the day. So I really recommend kind of just apply to a lot. And that's why earlier I recommend create a couple different resumes. Of course, if there's one job you are really, really interested in, spend more time on that one and spend more time around catering to that particular job. But for practice sake, as a recruiter, it sucks when I interview someone and we really like them as we want to hire them, we like them as a person, but they're not really interested in Wave. That's fine. But I recognize that I think it's most important for this group and where you are in your career right now in your school to get that practice interviewing and getting good at it. Next up is something that most of us feel very uncomfortable with is networking and kind of the social side of things. So what I would recommend is push yourself a little bit, but also find a way to network that makes sense for you. And that may be literally what you're doing today is that, but also, joining meetups or, it's as easy as if there's a particular company you want to work for, and you see that their CTO writes an article, comment on it, then maybe message him on LinkedIn saying what you liked about the article, maybe one day how you'd like to work for his particular company or her particular company. So just, find a way that feels natural to you and doesn't feel, like a burden, but it really helps put your name out there. I mean, it really ultimately is marketing. The more times you see a name, the more times you see a person, you remember it better. So it's just a way for you to get yourself out there and potentially get your foot in the door. Again, do with what reasonably feels comfortable for you. People often forget this. Please include links to your work. So if you do have personal projects that you're including on an application or you're reaching out to somebody in the email or LinkedIn, include that. Especially if you don't have work experience yet, it really helps the engineering team or the recruiters see the types of things you worked on and the quality of them. And it really can showcase because sometimes honestly, the personal projects are more valuable than work experience because you had to, there wasn't hand holding, there wasn't support, there wasn't, you had to make all the decisions. Those things are incredibly valuable. So let us see that. Otherwise, cover letters, I truly don't like them. I think they are, they're often quite useless because often everyone's using the exact same template. And I don't want to read them, but some companies are going to require them. So you may have to write them. But what I would say is I see this about, I want to say 20% of the time where people forget to actually edit the company name. So they'll say hi, recruiter. I'm really interested in working at Shopify. I really work at Amazon. And this happens, I think, honestly, a lot. And again, I personally would look past it it's fine, whatever. But there will be a lot of companies that get personally hurt by that. Or they'll, say your attention to detail isn't great, which sure, you made a mistake. You're probably busy in your personal life and, school and other stuff going on. But just, if anything, if you're going to write a cover letter, just get the name of the company right. Otherwise, I always recommend a sincere note is a lot better. Rather than me having to read a templated one page that wasn't really specific to Wave or the role we're hiring for, literally just saying hello recruiter, hello Helenja, hello engineering team. I came across Wave, did some research, saw you guys are building X. That's so cool. I've worked on something really similar. Would love to maybe chat about a career or a job or something. That actually just means they even looked us up and have something of value that relates, or they find us interesting, or anything that's just honest. We can tell the difference. So I'd really recommend that over a cover letter if you do want to write something. Lastly, kind of on this area, apply through many sites and locations. So what I mean by that is most of you folks will go through your school portal or LinkedIn or like Glassdoor to look for job opportunities and co-ops and future jobs. That's great. You're going to find the majority of things there. But remember, there may be companies that could be interesting to you that don't use those methods. And it's really more about the startup space. So a startup may not have money to post on LinkedIn. It is incredibly expensive. Same with Glassdoor. So just be mindful of that. They may just want to spend their resources elsewhere, which makes a lot of sense. So they may be posting on places like Indeed or, Monster or what, like really like kind of crappy places to post, but they could be really interesting jobs, as well as places like AngelList, but those still start becoming paid for them. So just be mindful of like, if you're interested in working like a gritty startup, then you need to look for jobs where they be posting them versus on the regular channels. And likewise, so say if you're really interested in like a truly remote first company that that's the type of employee they're looking for, apply it like on remote sites. They exist. And there's companies, for example, like Zapier, who basically have been remote first for like the past 6 years or so and can do it really well. And they kind of have a community of people who always apply to their jobs on some of those remote sites. They don't post as much on LinkedIn. So depending on what you're looking for, be mindful of where they may be putting the job to find the companies that align with what you're interested in. Oh yeah, and just I put locations because right now, in the space we're in right now, you basically can get a job anywhere. There's so many companies hiring remote. So if you can't find what you're looking for locally or in Canada, apply to the States, apply to other countries. Lots of them will be, if they're a larger organization, they'll be opening to hiring Canadian because they have that set up already. So just be mindful around that. Okay. Interviewing. Okay, just a couple things, advice here, and then we can go into Q&A. So typically most, I would say, co-ops and kind of fresh engineers do this quite well, but just a reminder for those who may not do this. If you're going to interview a place that you're actually really interested in, take some time to prepare some notes. And this will just help you feel more confident in answering your questions and kind of speaking to the recruiter, because interviewing can be really nerve-wracking. But B, you're also just going to come off way better. And I'm not saying like read word for word some notes that you jotted down, but just like ideas and concepts that you'd like to discuss or you'd like to talk to them about. So do your research on the company, research the hiring team, and prepare some smart questions. So it can be really frustrating from this end when someone just asks me, so what does Wave do? It kind of tells me that like you applied blindly, and even though you got an interview, you truly don't care. And that's okay, that's their prerogative. But someone who says, oh, I see Wave just recently released X or did X, like how did the team do that? Or what technology does the team use? It just provides a little bit more like you're actually interested, right? Otherwise, prepare your answers. So you're going to get some common questions, like tell me about a time you failed, or walk me through a project, or tell me about a time you worked with a team. There'll be some really standard questions that you're going to get that you can prepare some answers for and not read off a sheet, but just feel comfortable speaking to them. I often find that many co-ops feel very nervous interviewing. So just practice that. I don't feel truly uncomfortable, and I feel like an old person saying this, but practice with a friend or someone that you feel comfortable with just a couple of times, just to say those things out loud, because it really makes a difference. And it really makes you kind of just seem more confident in the interview. What you can also do is to help yourself with that is just look on Glassdoor. Most companies are on there, and you can actually look at past interviews that other people have posted reviews about. And you can kind of see the types of things they may ask you, or their experiences, if it's like a hard interview, easy interview, just to help yourself prepare and give more context. And just the last couple of things I would recommend. So after you interview with a company, maybe hopefully ideally Wave one day, send a thank you follow-up, like, hey, okay, it's kind and polite and whatnot, but also kind of goes back to that marketing piece. We interviewed 10 people. We have 2 top candidates. They're literally identical. One emails a thank you. Their name just gets registered, in my head one more time. And often when you write that thank you kind of email, ask for the emails of the engineers or the other people you have interviewed with to send them a thank you note as well. Because then when we're discussing as a round table, like who we should be hiring, you're probably going to come off as someone they remember a little bit more. It's kind of that nugget after that. It's literally, unfortunately, we're just marketing ourselves, but that is the reality of getting a job. If you don't get the job, or if you do, still ask for feedback. I really hope you receive it from all places. You're not always going to get it, and that's okay, but ask for feedback, ask them to be honest, say like, I really want to improve. I want to know where I went wrong. Don't, and then I would say take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes they're going to give you an answer that's not really valuable. Sometimes they will. And sometimes that's their opinion. It's not correct. So, take it with a grain of salt. Don't be too hard on yourself, but you may get 1 or 2 nuggets that really help you for the next one. So don't be afraid to ask, and, don't be afraid of the answer. Kind of the last 2 points. I really, really think this is something that you guys will get to practice a lot in your careers being in this space, but know your worth. So know how much people like you are getting paid, know how much different locations are paying, what companies are paying. Do your research. There's lots of places you can find the information, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, by asking around, asking the companies exactly what their range is. So really feel comfortable, researching about compensation and asking questions around it. And lastly, if you do get to that offer stage where they're providing you with, whatever amount, get comfortable asking for more. Every single person should. Even if you feel like it's the best offer you've ever received, feel okay with saying, well, is there more vacation? Is there a signing bonus? Is there any wiggle room? You can do so in an email, you can do so over the phone, but please do it because there's no reason not to. They're not going to withdraw the offer for you asking that question. They cannot withdraw the offer if it's already out anyways. So might as well do it. If you feel comfortable, put it down in an email. If you want to make it more personal, do it over the phone or on a Zoom call or something. But please do ask. And what I'd recommend, if you want to make a strong argument, list out the reasons why you're worth more, or list out, after learning about the job, XYZ skills is at a different type of pay grade in your opinion. Here's the research you did for comparable organizations, right? So advocate for yourself, do the research, but it can make a difference of, not just dollars and cents, it's tens of thousands of dollars potentially. So feel comfortable doing that. And I really recommend just doing the research and finding out. I think, oh, that was the last one. Okay, cool. So let's dive into any Q&A. If anyone wants, you can feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to, or just ask over chat if you don't want to. If there's no questions, I was planning on providing my email for those who are here who may have like follow-up questions or do want to submit a resume to me, and then I can take a look at them. I'm going to be honest, I don't have all the time in the world, so you're not going to get it back like early next week, but I'd love to still help out as much as I can. So I'll try my best. So I'll throw my work email in the chat. Okay, I see a question from Daniel. How close do you look at personal projects that are included in the resume? Really closely. Like my standpoint in a lot of WAVE as well in a lot of places, a personal project is just as valuable as work experience. So please feel free to include them. Just make sure you provide good examples of work with information that actually helps. It doesn't just help say you built something, how did you do it? Why? What was the reason? Is really helpful. Okay, sorry, give me 1 second, Skylar. One of the last resumes shown, there was a section for relevant things learned in education. What exactly was that called? Let me take a look. Give me 1 second. Oh, relevant coursework. There you go. Thanks, Eric. But yeah, you can also name things whatever you want. Feel comfortable to kind of make your resume. I mean, we saw a couple different examples of people using different formats and different naming conventions and organizing it differently. All of them are perfectly fine. Again, there's a good chunk like some of the resumes you're submitting are going to be reviewed by like a program first anyway, so no one's going to see them to start. It's just looking for phrases. Hopefully a human does, but Just organize it how it makes sense for you and just include those kind of like buzzwords. Okay, next question. What are some of the best questions people have asked while being interviewed that you had? Honestly, some of the best questions are ones that are detailed. And that it really just shows to me someone that has taken the time to learn about the company or the team or what they're doing. So it's not like, a question like, I do think it's an important question to ask people, like, what do you like about the company you're working for? But I'd say it's particular. So I did have someone applying to, I recently, like, for example, our engineering manager for our banking team in particular. And they took the time to look up some of our competitors in the space and kind of asked a question or that would just sparked a good conversation around what that meant for Wave. I mean, they were kind of sharing their opinions. So it's not necessarily a question, but it's more being able to pick a point you feel comfortable kind of conversing about that is really relevant to the organization. And so like it kind of shows that you did a little bit of work and research in terms of like really understanding what they do. That is a lot more valuable than like one particular line of question that you can ask, and kind of, that's capped and used all the time. I'd say make it very, very particular. What I would recommend from your standpoint is like at this point, kind of in your schooling and your career, questions you should be asking that's helpful for yourself is really dig into the environment around growth and learning. You're at a stage in your career where the most important part is getting opportunities to learn and push yourself. So align with companies that are going to do that and going to support you through that. I think that is ultimately the most important thing at this point. So just make sure you really also dig into those and ask for examples. Don't just let an organization tell you like, yes, we focus on growth. Ask them how and why and for examples. Is there any other questions?
I have a couple questions if no one else has any more.
Let's do it.
Someone actually asked me recently, I think just for some advice about an uncompleted project. Should they list a link for that on their resume? Should they include that on their resume under a personal project if they don't have maybe other projects?
Yeah, that's a great question. I see no problem with that. Again, if you're looking for something to, I wouldn't just say padding because everything you put there is valuable, but if you're looking for something to take up a little bit more space and show who you are, there's no problem with having it being half done. Just state that. And it's the same as like what I mentioned before, is like if you're struggling with things to find to put on your resume, add what you'd like to do next, because that shows planning, it shows initiative. So that's perfectly fine. Yeah.
Cool. Also, it's very common for there to be kind of a phone screening before a technical interview. What are the main things recruiters are looking for during the phone screening period?
Mm-hmm. So for this kind of stage, other stage we may be looking for very, very particular technical skills. For people who are still in school, what's going to be incredibly important is their ability to work well with others, that collaboration piece. So that's why talking about a school project or even a school project that went wrong, I think maybe Will, you had me ask you this question, but I often ask people like, tell me about a time you failed. I want to know how you deal with a hard circumstance. I want to know, like everyone, it happens to everybody. We're all going to have, shitty projects or shitty things happen. So I just want to know like how you handle those situations. And I want to understand what you learned from it. So I may not directly ask you like what the outcome was, but provide those examples. If someone asks you, tell me about a time you failed, or tell me about something you're very proud of. Don't just say it, then say the impact it has for like the next thing you've worked on. So those are some things that they're going to be looking for. There may be a couple like key technologies that a company is looking for in particular, but someone who interviews smoothly, can kind of speak confidently about their work and how they learn and grow is going to be very important. And the other thing that can be tricky, like most of you probably don't know what you want to do next, and that's okay. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to state that. And most people think that as well, rather saying like, here's where I'm finding I'm most interested, like the areas I'm most interested in. Here's the types of work I think I would align well with based on this type of experience. So don't feel too pressured to have like a plan in place or kind of like a keyed answer for that, but rather just be very open and candid around it. But yeah, so collaboration, feel free, like feel confident speaking of your examples and give good quality examples. Cause like, again, you're not going to have the necessarily the work experience or, engineering experience we're looking for yet, but if you can speak about them eloquently and tell us what you learned and how you've grown, that's going to be way more valuable to learn about.
For sure. Thanks.
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, so I'm posting my email in the chat for those who want to reach out. Again, if I get like a bunch of resumes, it will take me some time, but if one or two of you have questions that you'd like to follow up on, I'll try my best to get back to you next week and provide anything else. Cool.
Thank you so much, Helenja. This was a really insightful talk. I would have killed for something like this in first year.
I hope so. I mean, it's really dry for like a Friday at 4, but I hope people got like 1 or 2 nuggets out of it.
I for sure did.
Yeah, just kind of moving the dial for success. It's hard at this stage. There's a lot of co-op students going after a couple of different roles. So anything you can do to really like just kind of move yourself a little bit more successful. So the hardest thing to do is that networking piece. Like I personally even feel very uncomfortable with it, but it really makes a difference. Like literally when the CTO of Wave sends me a message saying this person reached out to me on LinkedIn, I'm going to talk to them. They, versus someone who may have just applied where I have 100 other resumes. So do that piece if you feel comfortable. Don't spam everybody, spam the ones you actually care about. But recognize that also like right now, you're also just trying to get your foot in the door. Once you have this relevant experience, you all will be so incredibly employable and hireable, a year after school. The scales really tip for where people are going to be reaching out to you like literally weekly for jobs that pay a lot of money. So you just need to do the work now to get yourself comfortable with interviewing, negotiating, and kind of putting yourself out there to get that first kind of opportunity. But cool. This was lovely. Feel free to email me. And yeah, thank you guys.